Hello YouTube fam, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Tina and I make videos on lifestyle, home, and DIY projects every single week. Before we jump into it, I just want to quickly say thank you guys so much for 150,000 subscribers. We just hit this milestone as I'm filming this, so thank you so much for following along. I'm still in such disbelief that my channel has grown this much, and I just want to thank you guys for tuning in every single week. It just means so much to me that you're here. And to celebrate, I of course want to do a giveaway, so make sure that you guys watch the next video for all the giveaway details. I usually do a Target gift card, but if you guys would like a gift card to any other stores, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear some of your suggestions. Okay, so for today's video, we're going to dupe some wall art that I've seen online. I've been really itching to create some artwork, so I hope that you guys like these projects. They're super easy and also really fun to make, so I hope that you guys like these project ideas. And before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe down below, and let's go ahead and jump into the first project. Okay, so the first piece that I'm going to try and dupe in this video is inspired by this one. It is a $300 paper mache piece from West Elm, and truthfully, I do understand why it is $300. It is a pretty large piece and it's also handcrafted, but I figured that we have our own hands and we know how to craft, so this is going to be a fun project to try and dupe. So my thought process here is to start with some cardboard pieces, and you guys know I'm ordering a lot of stuff since I don't have anything. So I have a lot of cardboard boxes, and instead of letting them go to waste, we're going to reuse them to create some beautiful art. And to attach it together, we'll probably use some hot glue as well as some Mod Podge. This is going to be a fun challenge, so I'm first going to cut out our template and we'll go from there. Hello from VoiceOver Tina. So I did a bunch of math to get my measurements, and the original piece is about 42 inches long, but mine is going to be about 27 inches, so I'm splitting the length in 3 and then getting 9-inch arches. To create this shape, I'm tracing around a plate 3 times, and then from there we're just going to draw straight lines down to make the arch. For the inner part, I found the middle and then I used a small container to trace out a circle and then draw these straight lines again. So now it's time to cut it all out, and since we don't need perfect edges for this project, I'm just using my scissors for the larger pieces, and you'll also see that I use my X-Acto knife for smaller details. Now that it's all cut out, we're gonna go ahead and make our rainbow shapes. So I'm just using my ruler, and I'm also going to be freehanding some of the curves just to match the original piece. And throughout this whole process, I really was not worried about getting everything perfect. So if you're not one to have exact measurements, that is totally fine. Sometimes eyeballing it is just as good, so don't worry too much about perfection with this project. And in total, you guys will see that we'll have 4 arches within each one of the 3 arches. Okay, so last night I was just trying to figure out how to build the base. A lot of it was just cutting and playing around with things, and I just wanted to figure it out before I showed you guys how to build it. But I did figure it out, so let me explain to you guys how we're going to put this all together. So you guys can see here there are 4 different arches, and each one basically needs to stack on top of each other to make that 3D shape. So I have created that here, but basically what I'm doing is cutting out each one of the shapes and then I'm stacking them on top of each other. So in between, we are sandwiching 3 pieces of cardboard, and that will give us enough height in between each one of the layers. And that way it gives us this really cool 3D effect here. So you can see here that everything is stacked on top of each other, and I just need to do one more ring, and then also for these 2 sections, and then we're going to put it all together. Okay, so here is the full effect, and I basically am just going to trace each one of these and then make the layers for this one. So it literally is a copy, cut, and paste project. Let's roll the montage and put this baby together. So now all I had to do was cut out the rest of the shapes, so you guys will see that we're going to need 3 of each of the 4 arches. So using the 4 pieces I already cut out, I'm using that as a template just to trace and then cut out the remaining pieces. So you'll see that it's going from the largest on the bottom to the smallest on the top. And since I already created each one of the templates, it was just so much easier and quicker to get the rest of them done. So essentially we're gonna create these small standoffs in between each one of the layers. So I cut out little rectangles with the scrap cardboard, and then I glued 3 on top of each other with some basic tacky glue. And depending on how high you want each one of these levels, you can stack on more or less. I just found 3 to be the perfect height. And also keep in mind that with each one of the levels, the arches are getting smaller, so I'm just adjusting the size of the rectangles to account for that. So these are all stacked up and ready to go, and now it is time to assemble. To speed up the whole process, I'm using my hot glue gun, so you'll see that I'm gluing it on the top and the sides as well as the bottom of each of these levels. Alternatively, you could also cut out the arches about 4 or 5 times and glue those together, but that would take a lot more cardboard as well as a lot more time to cut out. So in my opinion, the standoffs are just so much easier to do, but both are great options. And as I was gluing each one of these levels, I was just getting so much more excited about this project. It really was coming to life, and I was so happy with this base. Oh my god, this is looking so good. Like, I'm really happy with it. So now that I've discovered mesh tape, I think what I'm going to do is cover up the edges on the top here, and that way we can kind of smooth it all out just like that. And then just cover the whole thing, and that's gonna give us a lot of traction to put the paper on top of. Oh my god, I'm so excited for this. Okay, I'm like getting ahead of myself. Okay, let's go. So this mesh tape worked really well when I used it on my previous DIY, which if you haven't watched it yet, go back and do so because it's a really good one. But when it came to the cardboard, I found it not to adhere as well. So if you wanted to, you can also use masking tape for this step. And my main purpose for using this tape was just to cover up all the gaps in between all the layers as well as the edges. So this is going to be a great foundation before moving on. With some Mod Podge and water, I'm creating a paste for our paper. So I kind of just eyeballed this, but I had about a 3:2 ratio of glue to water and mixed it all up. So right on top of the mesh parts, I used these strips of paper just to get a good foundation down around the edges. And each time I laid a piece down, I'm adding the glue on before and after just to really saturate that paper. And then I'm using my foam brush to pat it on. And I totally remember doing paper mache in elementary school, and we would dip the newspaper into the glue and water. So this project really just brought me back to elementary school art class. And doing paper mache was one of my favorite things, so this project was really fun to do. So on top of that, I decided to use paper towels, and I split the layers so that it would be thinner. So I just used this to cover the cardboard, but feel free to use any paper that you would like. Normally you would do paper mache projects with some newspaper, flour, and paste. So my method is a little bit different, and I wanted to use paper towels because there's a lot of texture on those to build the base, but feel free to do this project however you'd like. And once we got to the actual arches, I'm placing the paper towels onto it horizontally, and then I'm pressing down on each one of the levels. And this just does a really good job of covering up all those gaps and making it look like one solid piece. So I covered the whole entire thing and I just let that sit overnight to dry. Alright you guys, this is dry and look! I'm so happy with how this is coming along. It looks exactly like my inspo. To speed up the drying time, I actually put this next to a vent, so that helped out a lot. So this is actually pretty solid. Like, the glue worked really nicely, and all we have to do now is to cover it and just make it look nice and white. So let's finish this project. To cover the whole piece, I'm using joint compound and I'm spreading it on the entire piece using a palette knife as well as my fingers. As I was doing this, I learned a couple of key things, one being that you should start from the lowest level and then work your way upwards. That's definitely not what I did with the first one, but you'll see that I learned my lesson and did that with the others. And I also found it to be easier just to cover the side pieces first before going on to the front of the arches. I wanted this to look a bit more like stone with some slight texture, so that's why I'm going with joint compound. But you could use other materials for the outside of this piece, including paint, plaster of Paris, or even paper mache clay. And honestly, I was just experimenting with this project to see what would work to get my vision to come to life. So feel free just to take inspiration from these techniques to make it your own and make a piece that best suits your style. And another quick tip I want to give you guys is to elevate the piece on top of something. So you'll see here that I have it on a piece of cardboard, and this just makes it so much easier to work with. That way you can get onto any corner pieces and you can also avoid getting it stuck to your work surface. So after that was all covered, I just let that sit to dry, and if you wanted to, you can also do a second layer on top. To smooth things out, I gave this a good sanding with a fine grit sandpaper, and if you wanted to keep the texture, you could totally skip this step as well. I seriously cannot believe we were able to make this piece come to life with just some cardboard, paper, a ton of glue, and some joint compound. This came out better than I imagined, and I am absolutely obsessed. And I hope you guys love this one too. I also really appreciate that this is a versatile piece, so you can lean it against a shelf or style it hanging on a wall. The next project that we're doing is inspired by this piece right over here, and I've been dying to add some raffia and also a lot of 3D texture onto a canvas. So here I have your basic canvas. This is the value one, so it is pretty inexpensive. But when you add in a lot of textures and also a frame around the canvas, it just looks so much more expensive. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started and show you guys how I transform this canvas. To start, I'm adding gesso to the whole canvas, and instead of brushing it on, I'm actually going to use my palette knife. And this is going to make it so it's a little bit more textured, and that way we don't have any brush strokes on the canvas as the base. So after that's all dried down, I'm using a light brown and a brown acrylic paint, and I'm also going to water it down. So this is gonna make a very light wash for the background, and I'm using the light brown on the very top section, and then with the darker brown color, I'm gonna fill up the rest of the canvas. With this layer, it's going to be pretty sheer, so you don't need to be super even with it because we're gonna add in some texture. And to do that, I'm taking a crumpled paper towel and I'm basically just dabbing some of that paint off. So this is gonna lift the paint and give us a really great washed out texture. Usually I use this technique with watercolors, but since we watered down the paint so much, this works perfectly with acrylics as well. For this little section, I'm also just gonna lift off some paint by adding on more water to my canvas and basically just pushing the paint with my brush. This is gonna give us some negative space for an even more layered look. And right on top of that section, I'm using a watered down off-white color, and I'm just doing some random strokes. This is an abstract piece, so there is no rhyme or reason on how I'm creating this shape, but I basically just wanted it to go off of the canvas to give some more visual interest. Alright, so all the watery paint has now dried down, so I'm just using black acrylic paint without watering it down at all, and I'm creating an imperfect half circle shape. You'll see that I'm very loosely creating each one of these shapes, and to help with that, I basically moved my hand down a little bit further on the brush, and that way you have a little bit less control to create some of these looser shapes. To balance the top of the painting that has gone off of the canvas, I wanted to draw a little wavy line at the bottom, and this is also going to come off the canvas as well. Okay, so going back to the half circle shape, I'm adding in some thicker brush strokes, so when this dries down, you'll see even more texture. All the different techniques that I'm using in this painting are just a few simple ways to add in dimension and movement to your painting so that they don't feel too flat. So I hope some of these tips help you guys out because I think that it makes a world of a difference. I also added in a little sheer circle at the top left corner just to fill in some of that negative space. I also wanted to add some more white throughout the whole canvas, so I'm using a piece of chalk and just adding in some random lines and marks throughout. And you could also rub it into the canvas, and this just gives it a really nice subtle layer of texture. While that's drying, we're going to work on the raffia, so I'm going to cut off a piece of twine that is close to the color of the raffia. Then with small sections of raffia, I'm going to take 2 strands at a time, and then I'm tying a lark's head knot around the twine. And I repeated this process across the entire way. This step is optional, but I'm brushing out the raffia just to separate the strands even more, and I think this just makes such a difference in adding some volume to the fringe. I'm placing that against the edge of the semicircle just to make sure that it's long enough, and then from there I'm just going to glue the ends to the back with some hot glue and then snip off the ends for a more seamless look. I also wanted to mention here that the original piece is inspired by Elon Bird, and it didn't feel right just copying her work exactly, so the one that I have here is actually quite different than her style, but I just wanted to show you guys how to get a similar look with these techniques so you can make your own version. And I always feel like a painting is never truly done, so I did end up doing some last minute finishing touches just to balance it all out. I absolutely love how all of these painting techniques came together to create a very unique boho inspired piece. The texture in here is just so good, and this definitely looks like a fancy painting that you would find at a high-end store, and I really hope you enjoyed the whole process painting it with me. Okay, you guys, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on those projects. I'm really proud of how they turned out, and I hope you guys liked going through the whole journey of making those pieces with me. And if you feel inspired to recreate any of the projects or try out any of these techniques, make sure to post it over on Instagram and tag me, and also give me a follow because I post on there every single day. It's also been a while since I've shared some of your recreations, so I'm going to put them up here on the screen. Thank you so much for sharing your creativity with me. And again, make sure that you guys stay tuned for the next video for our 150,000 subscriber giveaway. I just want to give you guys a big virtual hug, so thank you so much for watching today's video. Stay inspired, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!